This is Cheryl McQueen, designer with Daubers Designs. This video will show you how you can make a beautiful card using the Sweet Poppy Aperture Leaf. This aperture is quite large, and I typically make smaller cards, but this makes such a stunning impact that I may just have to start making larger cards in the future. I hope you like this video. So let's get started by looking at the supplies that I will be using today. We will be using the Lavinia Multifarious Smooth and Supreme. I would suggest that you get the A4. This is a larger paper. It's just almost 8.5 by 11 inches. So that way you will have enough room to cut your piece. This piece is cut to 4 3/4 by 7 3/4. Then we will be making a frame out of cardstock. And I've chosen to do a green. We're going to be using the Bermuda color today, and this really blends well with that Bermuda color. This one is cut to 5 inches by 8 inches. Then for our card base, we will take a 8.5 by 11 piece of cardstock that we then cut down to 10.5 inches by 8 1/4 inches, and then we will fold that in half to make our card base. The Sweet Poppy Leaf Aperture is a little bit of a newer one as of the making of this video. This is a quite large aperture, but it just makes a really, really beautiful look. This one is SP6125L, and it's made by Sweet Poppy. For our stamps today, we will be using the Lavinia Lupin stamp, which is the LAV 774, and then we will be using the Cherry Blossom from Lavinia, which is LAV 176. I don't have the packaging for this one anymore. I think this one may have been one that was given to me by a friend and didn't have the packaging, but anyway, this is just the branches of the cherry blossoms that we will be using around the edge. We will be using for our black ink the VersaFine Clair Nocturne. For our colors that we're going to be using, the Leaf Aperture is going to be done in the Elements by Lavinia, and this color is Bermuda. Then when we begin working on Lupin and on our cherry blossoms, we will be using the Distress inks and kind of doing a painting technique. We'll be using the Kitsched Flamingo, Vintage Photo, Walnut Stain, and Black Soot. We will also be using the Lavinia masking sheet to create a mask to cover up Lupin, so that when we're doing our stenciling, we don't get the green color on him. And so what I'm using for that is the Lavinia masking sheets. You get 4 sheets in a package, and these are very, very large sheets, so you might be able to kind of see that I've got some pieces cut out that I used for other projects. And the nice thing about this is that you can use them 2 or 3 times. We will also be using the magnetic background, since our Sweet Poppy stencils are magnetic. You don't have to use one of these, but this is extremely helpful to help keep your magnet from wiggling around, when your cardstock from wiggling around too much when you're actually doing your stenciling and blending part. If you'd like to, you can use the Sweet Poppy low tack tape to tape this down once you put it on top of your actual aperture on top of your magnet to give it a little bit more stability, but again, that's not necessary. We will be using, I like to use a stamping platform. Grab mine right here. With my particular stamping platform, what I have done is put a sticky grid down so that I can place my card without having to worry about working around any magnets. We will also be using a blending tool, So I've just got a little blending brush here to do the full light background, and then to do our little accents around, we will be using a little dauber to do that and to add our shadowing underneath the rabbit. Also, for the moon, we will just use a 1-inch circle mask. This is just it's hard to see a little bit, just a little plastic 1-inch circle. I like to put tape on the back of mine so that I don't have to worry about it wiggling around and having to hold it while I'm working with it. We will also be using some paintbrushes. I usually just go ahead and pull out 3 different sizes so I can pick what I want to use. I usually use a bigger brush for the big areas and then a little more detailed, tinier brush for the details. And we'll be using a water mister as well and some paper towels. And then for doing some of our grounding work here, I will just use a very fine tip black ink pen. So now we're ready to go ahead and start working on our project. So what we will do first is we're going to start out by stamping lupin. So what we're going to do is take our multifarious cardstock and our stamping platform. And we're just going to go ahead and place that down on the stamping platform. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to place lupin about, let me scoot that up so you can see it a little better. So about a 1/2 inch from the bottom of the card, and about maybe a 1/4 inch in from the right hand side. So we'll just place him on our cardstock, close up that and get it stuck down, and then we're going to ink up our stamp with the VersaFine Clair Nocturne. I like to put a lot of ink on because I like a really nice, bold, crisp image. Alright, and I did get just a slight little bit of ink there. We'll just wipe that up so that it doesn't smudge our card. And then just press down all across the stamp, applying pressure so that we make sure that we get a nice clean image. Alright, that's a good image. Now if he didn't look quite as dark as I like or whatever, then that's a nice thing about the stamping platform, is that you can always re-ink and then do some more. Then the next step that we're going to do is we need to create a mask of exactly the same image. So we would take a piece of our Lavinia stamping mask and actually stamp onto the masking sheet. I have a tutorial that shows you how to do the masking sheets. It's under the Talk Crafty to Me, under the design team page. So if you'd like to go see how that's done, I'm not going to take your time showing you again. You can always look at that video and show. But that's basically what you're going to do, is just stamp that image, and then you're going to cut it out. Now the paper has a clear plastic side and the paper side. So once you cut out lupin, now the thing that you can do with lupin is it's got all these little hairs and everything. You don't have to worry about that. You can just cut those off. As you can see with him, I don't have any of the little hairs on there because that's not going to matter when you're actually doing the stenciling over your aperture. It's not going to matter because then that just looks like it's in the background. So once you cut him out, you will remove, if I can get my fingernail under there, remove the plastic sheet. It's very hard to see, but I'll try to turn it. And keep this. because you're actually going to be able to keep this and use it several times so that you don't have to keep re-stamping and cutting them out. Then what you're going to do is you're going to place this cutout image, the sticky side down, over the top of your stamped image. And so what that's going to do is that is going to mask out so that when you do your stenciling on top of it, you can keep looping clean enough that you will be able to go in and do your colors without it being muddled by the green. Alright, so we can go ahead now and remove this from our stamping platform. Set the stamping platform aside. And so now we're going to take our metal aperture stencil and our magnetic sheet, and we're going to place our card on top of that, and then we're going to line up our stencil on top of the card. Get it positioned exactly how you'd like for it to be. Now, especially when you've got a smaller aperture, you will want to mask off the edges. I'm going to go ahead and do that because sometimes I get just a little carried away with my brushing, and that will keep the green from getting into the wrong spot. So, and it also gives this just a little bit of stability. So I'm just taking the Sweet Poppy low tack tape, going along the edges, and like I said, that just gives it a little stability, and it also keeps your ink from getting into the white spaces on around the edges, which we do not want to happen. All right. Now, after this step, we want to go ahead and place our moon mask. So I'm going to take my circle, find the place that I want to put it. And like I said, I like to use the painter's tape because that just keeps it from moving around when I'm actually doing the stenciling. And that's where we are right now, ready to do our stenciling. So I'm going to take my Bermuda. And one of the things that you're going to want to do is make sure that you get just a light background to start out with. I take a little piece of scrap paper on the side because my Elements inks are, it's a very juicy pad, and so when it starts out with, it's just a little bit too much ink. So I just rub a little bit to get some of it off, and then very lightly and gently I'll just go in circles and put down a nice soft background of the Bermuda green. Okay, and now that you have your background down the way that you like it, you're going to want to go ahead and just do a nice little darker edging, as you can kind of see as we did here in the example. I like to use the small, very small little daubers. I just feel like I have a lot more control over them. You can use your blending brush, or you can use a larger blending dauber if you'd like. Like I said, my preference is just to use a little bit smaller ones so that I have just a little bit more control. So I will dab it into the Bermuda, and again, just kind of dab a little bit off so that I'm not getting too much. And then I'm just going to gently flick onto the paper to start getting a nice darker edge. Okay, and you can actually see why I try and clean it off. I did get a little bit of a darker spot there. I'm going to see if I can't blend that out just a little bit. And then I'll just briefly brush across. That just helps to blend all of the color, the dark and the light together, so that you get a very nice, smooth little area. I don't know if I try to erase that darker spot, if I'll make it better or worse, but we will try it. So if you ever have a mistake or something that you don't like and you want to lighten it up, I do like these little Tombow Mono. It has a sand side and an eraser side, and you can use the sand side to just remove a little bit of the ink if you get too much. I'm not going to worry too terribly much about it, because when I put some of my branches across that, it will probably cover some of that up and you won't notice it as much. Okay, so now we have got our background and a little bit of a darker edge around the aperture to kind of make it have almost like a little frame. I may put just a little bit more right across here. Okay, so now we are to the point where we can go ahead and I think I will go ahead and leave my aperture down for the moment, because what we're going to do now is we're going to kind of create this lovely little almost starry background effect with our water. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our water and we're just going to spritz it. And if you spritz fast, you'll get finer little dots, and then if you spritz slow, then you usually will get some bigger dots, and I like to get a mixture of those. So you just let them set for just a moment. And then I just like to take a paper towel and blot up. And when you do that, then you kind of get that nice little starry effect in the background. I may have gotten a little bit much right there, and I can always just go back in and touch that up just a little bit so it's a little fainter. And now we are ready to go ahead and remove our aperture. So we can take off our tape. Lift up our stencil. Move our magnetic sheet out of the way. And now we can go ahead and just lightly go around the edge of our moon with the same color. Let me make sure I'm getting the green one. Just very, very lightly going from the center of the moon out. Just create a very small kind of little halo effect. If you wanted to do that before you take your stencil off, so if you're worried about, oh, I might get over into the white edge, you can do that. Leave your stencil on and do this first. It doesn't matter. It just depends upon how comfortable you are with your skills at not going over the edge. Sometimes I'm not real good at doing that. So we are just bringing a little bit of a halo around our moon. And now we are ready to go ahead and remove the moon mask and the rabbit mask. And so there you can see that with our rabbit mask we can not have to worry about having the green in the background. Save this piece. Just take your little plastic piece that you took it off and place it back on there, and then you can use it again for another project. Now we are ready to go ahead and start stamping our cherry blossoms. So I'm going to bring my stamping platform back, move some of this stuff out of the way. Don't want to knock it off of my table. All right, and then I'm going to place my card back down onto the stamping platform. Now, sometimes I'll go ahead and put little pieces of the paper around the edges. I'm going to scoot this down just a little bit so that I don't get ink all over my sticky grid. So I'm going to place that one there, and let's see if I've got another little piece that I can use. I'll just go ahead and cut a little extra piece to run along the side. All right, and so now we will take our cherry blossom branch, and we're just going to place it up here in the corner. And so that it kind of comes over the aperture and looks like we've got a little bit of depth there. Stamp that down. Get a nice crisp clean image. And then we're going to go ahead and continue around the edge to place more of our cherry blossoms. And as you can see in the example, just along the side there. Alright, and there we have our cherry blossoms stamped around the edge. And so we're ready to go ahead and get the grounding in underneath Lupin and start with our coloring and painting part. So let me get my stamping platform out of the way here. So for grounding Lupin, this is where I like to take my black pen, very fine point black pen, and just draw a little bit of ground and grass sprigs under his feet, just so it doesn't look like he's just floating around. Make sure you do one under this foot as well. And then I'll just add just a few more kind of around. Just so we can see that he is not just floating around. All right, so now we will go ahead and start working on doing our coloring. Now you can do any way that you'd like to. You can use color pencils, you can use art markers. My preference is to use my distress inks. I like the painting. That's just part of the fun to me. And then the nice thing about it is you know, my inks I have for other things. So if I don't happen to have art markers or color pencils on hand, then I know I always have my inks. So today, that's the process that we're going to use to add the color to our project here. Okay, so we're going to start out by doing our cherry blossoms. So I'm going to do that in the Kitsch Flamingo. Now, the way I'm going to do this is I'm just going to put some of this ink down over here on the side. And then I'm going to spritz just a little water kind of above it, just so that I've got some to dip my paintbrush in. And I am going to use my very teeny tiniest, finest brush that I have. And I'm not going to get a whole lot of water on the brush because I want these to be pretty dark. So I'm just going to dab just a tiny little bit just to get the brush a little wet. And then I'm going to go into my Kitsch Flamingo, pick up some of the ink, and just dab it onto my flowers. You can make these as light or as dark as you like. If you don't want to dip your brush in each time, then you can have some that are lighter and then some that are darker. I usually go ahead and start with putting my pink on the ones that are not on top of the aperture because I don't want to get the green all over my paintbrush. So start out by filling in your flowers that are on the outside in the white part. Alright, and so now we have done all of the pink for the cherry blossoms. And now we're ready to move on to lupin. Now the first thing that you need to be sure that you do before you do that is clean up your surface so that you don't get any of the pink into the ink that you're going to be using to make lupin, which is going to be the browns. So just wipe it up, just spritz it a little bit and wipe it up with a paper towel. And then we are ready to start working on lupin. Now for lupin, what we're going to want to do is start out with just a light brown for the base. So I have chosen to use the Vintage Photo, and we can use a little bit bigger brush for doing that. You can, if you want to try an even bigger brush, you can. Sometimes I get a little sloppy if I go too big, so I'm just going to stick with using my medium size. And we're going to do the same thing. We're going to take the Vintage Photo, and we're going to rub some onto our glass surface. Spritz just a little bit of water. Pick a little water up on the brush, and then just dip it into the ink on your work surface. And then literally you're just going to, oops, I kind of got a little outside the line there. See, that's why I like to use a little bit smaller brush. Just lightly put down a coat of the Vintage Photo. And we're going to do that all over except in the ear, because we're going to do some pink in the ear. So once you get your base of the lighter brown down, we're going to go ahead and go back in with the walnut stain, and we're going to darken the little bit of the shading areas so that it gives him some dimension. So I'm going to just put some of the walnut stain, let me scoot that over just a little bit over here on the side, and maybe spritz a little more water. And then we're just going to kind of go into the areas, and that's a nice thing about most stamps is that they kind of show you where the darker areas are, so that you can kind of follow along with those when you're adding your little bit darker color to get your shadows and shading in. Okay, and then that's basically it. You're just going in, like I said, over where the darker spots are and giving him a little bit of shadowing that gives him some depth there. Then we will take our brush and go ahead and clean out. And I just usually spritz a little bit, or you can take it to your sink if you want to and wash it out and get some of that brown out, so that we can go ahead and go back in and take a little bit of the pink to put inside the ears, the ear here. Put a nice little light coating there in his ear, and then if you want to get like a little bit darker pink right up there at the top where the shadowing is, then use less water on your brush and get a little bit more ink, and then that will kind of darken up there where the shadows are. And then I always like to do his nose in a nice little pink as well. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and spritz that, and you don't have to color in his eye, but I think it would be kind of cool to coordinate it by taking just a little tiny touch of the elements and putting it in his eye to give his eye a little color. So I'm actually going to pick up a little bit of water on that, and then I'm just going to dab it lightly so I don't have to put a great big smudge of it on the table, on the work surface, and then just dot. Just a little bit to give that eye just a little pop there. All right, and so now we are ready to go ahead and just give a little bit of shadow around the bottom of the ground where Lupin is sitting. And I'm also going to just go ahead and grab another little sheet so I don't get too dark. I'm going to dip into my black soot with my little dauber, get a little bit of the ink off, and then just at the base, just put a tiny little bit of it in there. Don't forget to put it also around his upper foot. And then that just gives him just a little bit more grounding. We don't want it to look like he's just floating around in the air. All right. So we are now to the point where all we have to do is put our card together. I am going to go ahead and just quickly wipe up the surface, because when I turn this upside down to put it together, I don't want to get my ink all over. So we'll just take that, clean up our surface real fast. Alright, so then we'll take our piece of cardstock for our frame, I like to use the adhesive tape. You can also use a glue for paper. I use sometimes the Ultra Bond adhesive. It has a very fine little point to it, so you can get small areas if you ever need to use that. But I like to use the running tape when I'm doing demonstrations because it just goes a little bit faster. And then I'm going to center this. Hopefully I don't get my head in the shot, but if I do, I apologize for that. Alright, get that centered and tack it down. And then we will take our card base and do the same thing. Center that, and our card is done. Now, like I said, since this is a larger card, if you do plan on mailing it, you will obviously need to get a larger envelope. And just remember that you'll probably have to put extra postage on it because it will be oversized. But, I mean, look at that gorgeous card. That is one thing about the larger cards is it really gives you a wow impact. I'm sure the recipient, when they pull it out, would just go, that's fabulous. So I hope you will give this a try. Thank you so much for watching my video tutorial today. Try using the Sweet Poppy Aperture Leaf Aperture. There's probably all kinds of designs that you can come up with, but I just wanted to have a little bit of fun with looping and make this card for you. So I hope that you have a wonderful day. Don't forget to be sure and check out all the video tutorials on the DelBellosDesigns.com website. And as I said before, if you want to watch the video on the masking sheet, it's under the Talk Crafty to Me tab. Have a great day.